In this sublesson, we are going to talk about guest shells. Guest Shell is an open source and secure Linux-based environment which is based out of CentOS. The Guest Shell feature is enabled on Nexus 9000 and Nexus 3000 series switches. If you look at it closely, Guest Shell is nothing but libvirt managed LXC container under the hood. Guest Shell leverages the benefits of Python and Bash Shell execution environments and NXOS app hosting framework. There are a bunch of commands that are available with Guest Shell. To enable the Guest Shell, use the command guest shell enable. Guest shell disable will disable the Guest Shell service. Guest shell destroy will deactivate and uninstall the Guest Shell. The Guest Shell reboot command will deactivate and reactivate the Guest Shell. The Guest Shell run command line will help you execute program inside the Guest Shell and return the output and exit the Guest Shell. Guest Shell sync. The Guest Shell sync command deactivates the current Guest Shell or current active Guest Shell, syncs its root file system contents to the standby RP, and then reactivates the Guest Shell again on the active route processor. Guest Shell upgrade allows you to deactivate and perform an upgrade to the current Guest Shell using the OVA file that is embedded with the boot system image. Upon successful upgrade, the Guest Shell is activated again. Guest Shell resize allows you to set or resize the Guest Shell parameters such as the memory, CPU, or the root file system. Let's now take a quick look at Nexus 9000 switch to see how we can access the Guest Shell feature. On the Nexus 9000 switch, there is no need to enable the Guest Shell feature. The Guest Shell feature is enabled by default. You can access the Guest Shell or get into the Guest Shell by executing the command guest shell. This will activate the Guest Shell and get you onto the shell prompt of the Guest Shell. Under the Guest Shell, you can run various Linux-based commands to perform several actions, such as yum-related commands to upgrade or perform a yum package manager upgrade, or install a yum package. And you can also execute Python scripts into the Guest Shell prompt. If you notice here, you're running on the Red Hat 4.8 version of the Guest Shell. The Guest Shell gives you access to Python version 2.7.5, and if you want to execute Python script commands, or if you want to execute Python scripts, you can execute inside the Guest Shell itself. It will not affect any of your other shell environments or execution environments. Apart from using Guest Shell for configuration or automation purposes, you can use the exit command to exit out of the Guest Shell. If you look at the show Guest Shell command, you will notice the current resources allocated to the active Guest Shell, which is you're seeing 1% of the system CPU resources, memory is 256 MB, and disk size is 250. You can use the command guest shell resize to specify the memory of, say, 275 MB and disable and re-enable the Guest Shell to get the new configuration into place. So we can say Guest Shell disable, say yes, and say Guest Shell enable, and your Guest Shell is back up again. Once you enable the Guest Shell, and if you try to enter the Guest Shell, if it's still activating, it might take some time, but once the Guest Shell is active, you should be able to get into the Guest Shell prompt. So Guest Shell, you should now be into the Guest Shell prompt. And if you now look at the show Guest Shell command output, we can see that the memory is now the newly resized memory that we configured for the Guest Shell. Now that we have seen how to resize the Guest Shell, we can use Guest Shell for more dynamic and automation purposes based on our network requirements.